Hello everyone, welcome to the JW Review. My name is Mike Felker and this is the weekly podcast where we are normally reviewing Watchtower study articles and comparing them to what the scriptures teach. Last week we did a full review of the annual memorial, so if you didn't get a chance to check that out, please do so. And this week we're actually going to be doing something different, just like we did last week, but we're going to be looking at the governing body update number 3 for 2022. And the governing body updates are basically just news about kind of what's going on in the organization, mainly from the governing body level. They're telling you, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what's going on. So kind of a news thing, talking about the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses, policy and things like that, world events. So we're going to be going through that in this governing body update. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be playing this video, and I'm going to be stopping it and interacting with it. And where applicable, we're going to be comparing it to what the Bible teaches. And so I'd like to start doing a little more of these types of podcasts that are kind of dealing more with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the leadership, more on a policy level. I've been getting just a lot of requests to do that. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. So if you like this sort of thing, let me know what you think and any ways that I can improve it. So this video is about 19 minutes and 46 seconds long, and just so you know, I'm going to be making this play a little bit faster just so we can get through this a little bit quicker. And plus, hey, when you're sped up, it makes you sound a little bit smarter. So that's what we're going to do here, and let's get rolling.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to this update. No doubt we're all still thinking about the memorial of Christ's death and the great love that Jehovah and Jesus have shown. And it was so good that many of us were able to be together in person for this most important occasion of the year. Were you excited when you heard that we would resume in-person meetings worldwide on April 1st? The governing body really felt Jehovah's direction when making that decision.
Okay, so first thing, and I'm not going to start and stop too much. I'll try to minimize it as best I can so this doesn't seem too choppy. So a few weeks ago, I did a podcast. I think it was titled, Is It Risky to Attend Kingdom Hall Meetings? So at the time, and this was again just weeks ago, Jehovah's Witnesses were not authorized to attend meetings or have any kind of gatherings. So when I made that podcast, I was actually under the impression that Jehovah's Witnesses were very excited to actually get back to going to meetings and seeing one another. That's just what I thought. I mean, why wouldn't you want to see your friends and loved ones after being separated for so long? It just seemed like, wow, of course they want to do that, right? And so here, Jeffrey Jackson, the governing body member, is basically saying, yes, you are excited to do this. But to my surprise, and now that I thought about this more, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, there were many who told me, not so fast. Most Jehovah's Witnesses that I know are not excited to get back to going to meetings in person. So I was a little bit surprised. So I started having various conversations with various Jehovah's Witnesses who would consider themselves usually in the PMO status. That's how they describe themselves in a lot of times. So they're saying, well, no, we and even other faithful Jehovah's Witnesses we know, they're not so excited to get back. Well, why? I was really curious. And they said, well, because not having to go to meetings means not having to get your family together and get them all dressed up and having to go to the Kingdom Hall meetings a couple of times a week. And it's just made things a lot less stressful, just being able to sit on the couch with your family, turn on your Zoom meeting and do that, and then you're done, right? So Jehovah's Witnesses were really in a lot of ways enjoying that. Just not having to go, because that can really just take a toll on your time, having to do all these different activities. I mean, not to mention field service, and that of course isn't happening. So from what I have been told, many Jehovah's Witnesses have been actually enjoying being a part of this religion basically virtually and not having to go door to door and whatnot. So that was surprising to me. So is that how you feel? Let me know. But Jeffrey Jackson is basically saying, yes, you are excited to get back. Well, who's Jeffrey Jackson speaking for? Well, he's the governing body member. So if he tells you you're going to be excited to go back, you're going to be excited to go back. I mean, that's kind of how this works, right? Because what would it be like if you told your elders, I don't really want to go back. I'm not excited about this. I was kind of enjoying things the way they were before. Now, Jeffrey Jackson says something else that's very, very interesting. That Jehovah has directed them to do this. Let me actually go back just a few seconds to see what he actually said, so I don't misquote him.
Yeah. Were you excited when you heard that we would resume in-person meetings worldwide on April 1st? The governing body really felt Jehovah's direction when making that decision, and we were excited to...
Yeah, so they really felt Jehovah's direction when making that decision on April 1st. Well, what do you mean you felt Jehovah's direction? So on March 30th, you didn't feel that was Jehovah's direction, or March 29th, or March 1st, February 1st, or even go back a couple of months. What happened? How did Jehovah direct you to make this decision? Right? What was it? Were you looking for a specific number of cases of COVID-19? Well, did you need Jehovah's direction to do that? Right? So how exactly does this work? And it's not the first time they've used language like this about getting Jehovah's direction to do things, because they sure didn't crack open their Bible and say, oh, well, according to this verse and this verse and this passage, Jehovah directed us to open meetings back up, right? So how exactly does that work? Is Jehovah communicating with them and telling them how to handle this whole COVID-19 pandemic? Well, they don't tell us, so all we can really do is speculate. But nonetheless, the governing body, they're the ones who Jehovah's supposedly directing and telling you all what to do when it comes to whether you can attend meetings or not. And they said April 1st, and then the doors open. You all go back on April 1st. So they say it, and that's just how it goes. But I'll have more to say about that in a moment.
Barrett. Less than 2 hours after our meeting, the breaking news was posted. Likely, you can identify with the feelings of our brothers and sisters in the following video.
Now going back to the Kingdom Hall, it's wonderful seeing the brothers and sisters, hugging them. It's emotional. Clearly Jehovah knows what we need.
I feel very excited. I'm happy to be here, hearing everybody's comments.
Well, my stomach was in knots this morning, but right now I'm really excited and happy that we're all here.
For Jehovah's people to get back to worship together at meetings, talk about a spiritual paradise.
Seeing one another face to face, or more accurately, mask to mask, after so long was wonderful. Singing together, praying together, meeting new ones in person, all of this is so refreshing. One 7-year-old girl said, "I have never been more patient in my life than waiting to go back to the Kingdom Hall for 2 years." Our return to the Kingdom Hall has been possible because, in many ways, we're in another phase of the pandemic. Now that there is a high rate of vaccination and new treatments are becoming available, many governments have relaxed restrictions. In various parts of the world, life is somewhat returning to normal. What does it mean? We're all learning to live with COVID-19 while still taking reasonable precautions. In time, we look forward to being able to resume additional theocratic activities. Now for the rest of our update.
Okay, so a number of thoughts here about this, and I've been trying to collect them in my head as we were watching this. So, first thing I noticed is everyone is wearing masks, and I have to be really careful about what I say here on YouTube. But I did find it interesting that it looks like you're required to wear the mask. I didn't see anyone not wearing one unless they were up on the podium speaking, or if they were being interviewed. It looked like, from what I could tell, everyone is required to wear a mask. But what I found interesting about that is that people were hugging and embracing each other, like, faces were literally touching. So it's just interesting. Okay, so you're doing it because you want to take just every extra precaution possible, which they say, okay, well, the mask is that extra precaution, but is social distancing a precaution that you're not going to take? So you're going to take the precaution on wearing masks, but you're not going to take the precaution on just hugging each other and literally being face to face with each other. So it sounds like that close proximity of being face to face, if you're all about taking these precautions, that seems a little bit consistent. What do you think about that? Share your thoughts with me. Okay, so the other thing I want to highlight, as I observed, was the fact that these people were embracing each other like it's the first time they've seen each other in years. The first time they've seen each other in years. So here's another thing that I thought when I made my that last video about is it too risky to attend Kingdom Hall meetings, is I was, I guess, naively assuming, I'll have to admit, that outside of the Kingdom Hall meetings, Jehovah's Witnesses, friends and family could still hang out, right? Go out to eat together, have people over. As far as I knew, the governing body never said you can't do that. So I just find it just shocking that it turns out that that's not really the case. That these Jehovah's Witnesses were not even seeing each other in person for literally years. And that's not because of the direction of the governing body, as far as I know. Now, some Jehovah's Witnesses who I know in the PMO status, they told me, here's the reason why, and I really appreciate all of you who do give me insight. You know who you are, so thank you. Doing podcasts like this wouldn't really be possible, or wouldn't be as good as it could be if you all didn't share with me your insights. So thank you for that, and by helping me, you're helping many others. Okay, so hopefully you know that I appreciate you and others appreciate you. Where was I going with that? Okay, so the reason why Jehovah's Witnesses were not just hanging out together, not worshiping together, but just not hanging out together, having people over just for gatherings, which I know Jehovah's Witnesses did pre-pandemic, obviously. But the reason they didn't do that is because of the governing body, who is God's channel, who you can't question, is telling you, you can't go to meetings right now because it's not safe and we're trying to protect you. So no meetings, no meeting together, none at all, okay? No field service, none of that. So if God's channel or Jehovah's directing them to tell you that, which if you're faithful Jehovah's Witness, you believe that they are, if Jehovah's directing the governing body to tell you can't meet in kingdom halls because it's too risky, well then it would just logically follow that, well, if I can't see these other Jehovah's Witnesses in meetings because it's too risky, I guess I shouldn't have them over to my house. And I just think about it from that aspect, right? Because and this is interesting to me because this goes far beyond rule following. Okay, so the rule following would be, okay, the governing body said we're not going to kingdom halls, we're not going to kingdom halls. This takes it to a next level. And this really kind of parallels with the authority statements that the governing body can make, like they did just like I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they basically said during the Great Tribulation, like, even if something seems illogical or doesn't make sense, you still do it and you don't question it, right? So that, I think that just permeates the thinking of Jehovah's Witnesses, that if the governing body says something about religious life, makes a rule about that, that carries over into other aspects of life. And maybe some of you who've been in this religion would be like, duh, Mike, of course. But guys, just understand that I've never been a Jehovah's Witness. I've never been, I've never thought about things like this in this type of way. I've never had this mentality of being given human direction and to obey it unquestionably, and that trickling into other areas of life just by implication. Like, that's just not how my mind works. So it just, wow, it made sense to me then once I discovered. That is why when these people are embracing each other in this video that we just saw, they're crying. It's like they haven't seen them in 2 years, because it's true. They haven't seen each other in 2 years. They haven't seen each other in 2 years. And that's just, as a follower of Christ, I can't imagine in my personal life outside of the church feeling this conviction to not see other believers. I can't even understand that. And so basically you're just limited to text, phone, and video, Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. Is that the Christian life that God wants you to live? Does God want you to have men tell you how to live your religious life, whether you can go to worship or not, and just by implication or logical deduction, not gather with other people too? Outside of it, personally, not even related to a formal religious gathering. Is that what God wants for you? Is to men, fallible men who make mistakes, to be given that kind of direction to you in requiring that you obey it? Is that what God wants? Because you sure won't find anything in the scriptures about that, about having to obey fallible men in that sort of way. So the last point I want to make here is just along the same lines, but it's just the very idea that this governing body, these fallible men, cannot allow you and your families and other believers to take your own risk assessments to be able to gather with other believers and worship God in person. Because what they're in essence saying is they don't trust you to be able to do that. Right? I mean, what else can you say? They don't trust you, and they don't think that you should be able to make your own risk assessment. Even though you do it every single day, you make your own risk assessment, whether to get in your car and drive to work or drive anywhere else. When you do that, you're making a risk assessment because you can die in a car wreck. Okay? When you fly on a plane, even with the mask, right? You're making your own risk assessment. You can vaccinate, make your own risk assessment. All of these things, you can be trusted to do that. But when it comes to worshiping God with other believers, you're not allowed to do that. If you worship God, if one month ago, if you were a Jehovah's Witness and you decided, you know what, I'm going to have 5 people over to my home today. We're going to sing songs and praise Jehovah, and we're going to open up His Word and read His Word together. According to the Jehovah's Witness theology, that would actually be disobeying God. Having several believers in your home with the Bible open and singing praises to God, reading the scriptures, praying together, that right there would be disobeying God. Now, if you put the Bibles away and you didn't sing any songs and you didn't pray, but you still had these several fellow believers over and you just hung out, you're not disobeying God because the governing body didn't actually say you can't do that. So I don't think you'd find yourself in a judicial committee if you just decided to have some Jehovah's Witnesses friends over, right? So that would be technically okay, even though most Jehovah's Witnesses apparently weren't doing that, but it would technically be okay. But the moment, get this, the moment you open up your Bible, you begin reading the scriptures, praying together, and worshiping God, that would actually be disobeying God. Please, please, please let that sink in. Okay, so we're going to leave that topic and we're going to go over to some other topics. I think the rest of this video really talks about the war that's happening between Russia and Ukraine.
I'm sure we've all appreciated the timely updates on jw.org. Our brothers and sisters in Eastern Europe have had a wonderful share in the ministry despite war and the pandemic. We are deeply touched by their godly devotion. The branch office in Ukraine is functioning and actively assisting tens of thousands of refugees. The branch reports that as of Monday, April 18, over 42,000 of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine have been displaced. Close to 19,000 have chosen to flee to other countries. We are deeply saddened to report that 32 brothers and sisters have died. How should we view this situation? Recall Jesus' words when he described the sign of his presence, as recorded at Matthew 24:6. He said, "You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars." Some Bible scholars say that this means wars that are nearby and wars that are in distant places. One translation says, "You are going to hear the noise of battles close by and the news of battles far away."
This is really bizarre. A very bizarre way to look at this text. It says in Matthew 24:6, "And you're going to hear of wars, and you're going to hear of rumors of wars." So that word "hear" applies to wars. So you hear wars. You're going to hear of wars or about wars, and you're going to hear about rumors of wars. Okay? See that you are not alarmed, for those things must take place, but that is not the end yet. So where is he getting? Now, first of all, he doesn't name these other translations, which is not surprising. They do that all the time. They'll cite a scholar and just say, a Bible scholar says this, right? But here he's just saying these Bible translations say these things, and it's like, well, okay, which one is it? And because at least if you knew which translation it was, maybe there's a way to find out, like, why in the world did they translate this in such a way? So if you want to dig into this, here's the way to do it. So just go to that word, rumors, and you can see the Strong's definition there, hearing, sound, or report. But if you really want to look at a scholarly definition, I like to use BDAG. If I can get it pulled up here. Well, my right click is not working. There we go. Okay. I don't know why that wasn't working. Okay. So BDAG, if you look at the different definitions of it, so what you can do in BDAG, which is really great, is you can go down and see what the definition specifically is for the verse in question. So you can see Matthew 24:6 is highlighted here, and it says fame, report, or rumor. So it's a report of a war or a rumor of a war. So fame, report, or rumor would all be acceptable translations of that Greek word. And of course, you can look at other definitions of the word, but none of these are really going to apply as well to Matthew 24:6. So they give these three instances, and they give a couple of like cross references here in various Greek literature, both in the Bible and outside of the Bible. So there's really nothing here that talks about the rumors being what's far away, and then the hearing of the wars is what is like actually close by. That just doesn't make any sense, and you certainly don't get it from the text here, or even the context. But let's look at the parallel passage in Luke, because I think Luke gives an interesting rendering of this. So if you go down to Luke, and you go down to verse Luke 21:9, it says, "When you hear of wars and disturbances," oh, interesting, "do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end does not follow immediately." So Luke uses disturbances. So, or let's look at the definition here, just like we did in Matthew 24. So you can go to the Luke 21:9, which is highlighted here, and it says, "Opposition to established authority, disorder, and unruliness." Interesting. So you really get this idea, if you look at both Matthew and Luke together, you get rumors. And the thing about a rumor, and I think that's a really good translation is rumors, because rumors are things that they're not verified. A rumor, something is not verified. It's kind of hearsay until you verify it. And to combine that with disturbances or confusion, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So, and I think that can really affect how you look at translating Matthew 24 and saying that you hear of wars and you hear rumors of wars. And within those rumors of wars, you have this idea of confusion, right, or disturbances, as Luke would tell us. So where he's getting this, just looking at other Bible translations, honestly, that just really doesn't matter. Just because you can cite another Bible translation, just say, oh, this Bible translation says near and far, therefore we can just import that into our theology and run with it. And create a theology out of it. That is not a responsible way to do Bible scholarship. It's just not. So if anyone has any more information on that, please let me know. But I just do not think that that's a valid rendering of this verse.
And that's true today. Some of us are hearing the sounds of war nearby. Others are hearing of wars in distant lands. These news reports often involve graphic pictures of bloodshed. At times, it seems like we're right there in the middle of the battle. Additionally, we see and hear reports of how our brothers are affected. How do you feel? Overwhelmed? Shocked? Angry? Traumatized? We feel the pain of our brothers and sisters. At times, we may even ask, why does Jehovah allow this? It's only natural to feel that way. But we need to be careful. What did Jesus say? The rest of Matthew 24:6 says, "See that you are not alarmed, for these things must take place, but the end is not yet." Do not be alarmed. Or as another translation says, take care not to be scared out of your wits. And another says, be sure that you don't get upset. What will help us not to be alarmed? Here are 4 points.
Okay, so let's talk real quick about this whole not being alarmed and why Jesus is even saying that. So see that you're not alarmed when you hear about wars and rumors of wars. So why would Jesus be telling this to the disciples? Well, look at the context. Go back to the context and start in verse 1. And coming out from the temple, Jesus was going along, and his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he answered and said to them, "Do you not see all these things?" Referring to the temple, right? "Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." So the disciples asked Jesus about the temple, and Jesus said, "The temple, guys, it's going to be no more. It's going away. It's being torn down." All right? Verse 3, "Now as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things happen?'" What are these things? Well, it's talking about what they just asked. The tearing down of the temple. "And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" The end of the age. And what is the end of the age? This is, you can cross-reference this phrase and look at other parts of Scripture. It's the end of the Jewish age. The end of the Jewish age. The temple being torn down would end that age, because Jesus would be instituting the new covenant. So you have the new covenant age, but the Jews didn't do away with the Jewish way of doing things, the old covenant. When the new covenant came along, the Jews just kept on doing what they had been doing before, rather than adjusting to God's new way of doing things. So Jesus is talking about that age, whether they would like it or not. That age is going to end, and he's going to tear down that temple, right? And so everything that follows is Jesus saying, here's what's going to happen leading up to that pinnacle event. So that's the reason why he says, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, see that you're not alarmed. Okay? So the temple hasn't been destroyed yet. You hear of wars and rumors of wars. Like, don't be surprised about these wars. Those things must take place. But that's not yet the end. In other words, these wars and rumors of wars don't immediately cause the temple to be destroyed. It's not the end yet. All right? Because Jesus says, "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of the birth pangs." Again, he's talking to the disciples about what's about to happen within their age, their generation, because Jesus says in Matthew 24:34, we'll go down and read it. "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." So that's what Jesus is explaining to the disciples here, about everything that's going to happen within their generation. Not another generation far away, but their generation. That's what this generation means. And a few other things are really, really applicable here, I think, to Jehovah's Witness theology. We can go over to the Luke passage and just see some interesting things. All right, so if you go down to verse 8, Jesus says, "See to it that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and the time is at hand." Jesus is saying, many will come saying the time is at hand. Now, who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? Jesus says, do not go after them. If people are saying the time is at hand, do not go after them. Well, isn't Jesus telling us about what's at hand and what's coming? Yeah, he is. He is doing that. But that's Jesus telling us. We're reading the words of Jesus. It's when a man comes. It's when a man comes and says things like, we're in the last of the last of the last of the last of the last days. Don't go after them. Don't go after them. Or when we're telling you, oh, on this year, the end is going to come. Oh, no, not that year. This year. Oh, sorry, that didn't happen. Oh, this year. Do not go after them. Do not go after people that do that and make false predictions. Don't go after them. Because you can only say, we're at the last of the last of the last of the last of the last days so many times. At some point, you've got to say, enough is enough. I'm not going to go after them.
First one, remember why Jehovah permits our brothers to be affected by war. Think of Job's example. At Job 1 verse 10, Satan complained to Jehovah, "Have you not put up a protective hedge around him and his house and everything he has?" Satan claimed that Job, and by extension all humans, served Jehovah only for selfish reasons. Jehovah allowed Job to lose everything, and yet Job kept his integrity and proved Satan a liar. The same is true today. Some of our dear brothers and sisters have lost everything, their homes, their possessions, their jobs, and even their loved ones, as they have fled the conflict. But as our brothers and sisters remain loyal to Jehovah despite war and other hardships, they give a loud reply to Satan's taunts about Jehovah's sovereignty. Second, we need to be realistic in our expectations. Recall that in the first century, Stephen and James were executed. Jesus' disciples fled Jerusalem and lost their possessions. These types of things have already happened since 1914. Some of us have been born in a generation where we have not witnessed firsthand the effects of war. And yet many of our brothers and sisters have had to live through wars and civil unrest of all sorts. And some in various places are experiencing it now. But how encouraging to consider that so many have faithfully and successfully endured such challenging times. Of course, the fact that we see these events occurring is evidence that Jehovah will soon intervene and put an end to all these wicked things we see in the world today.
Yeah, so this is where you're looking at the words of men telling you that Jehovah is going to soon intervene and put all these things to an end. Remember, men are coming saying the time is at hand. Do not go after them. Do not go after them. He's telling you that. They can say soon every year for the next 100 years. They can do that. They probably will do that. They're going to always be using soon, very near, last of the last days. Do not go after them. Because nowhere in the Bible does it say that in these modern times, you're supposed to be looking for this sign, that sign, and that sign that tells you that the end is going to be near. You're not going to find that in Matthew 24 or Luke 21 because those are talking about the first century events.
As one brother said, the disciples weren't asking because they wanted to know when these things would get really bad. They wanted to know when was the solution? When was the fix going to come?
Were they asking about that, when the fix was going to come? I don't know if I'd call that a solution or a fix, right? Because remember, the disciples were looking at the temple. I mean, look at the Luke account. And while some were talking about the temple, this is verse 5 in Luke 21, that it had been adorned with beautiful stones and dedicated gifts. So the disciples were admiring the beauty of the temple. And Jesus says, this is all going to get torn down. So when the disciples were asking Jesus about that, they weren't asking for a solution. They're just like, oh my gosh, they're probably thinking this is terrible. But Jesus, when is this going to happen? Right? When is this going to happen? And clearly that's going to be the end of the age. So when is all of this going to end? So they weren't asking for a solution. That's not what they were asking for. They did want to know when this was going to happen. And Jesus not only told them when it was going to happen, he did. He told them how it was going to happen and what was going to take place leading up to that pivotal event. So why is Jeffrey Jackson taking that and talking about the disciples and what they're asking about the temple and just trying to import it into our modern day?
Third, we remember that this is an opportunity to show our trust in Jehovah. This reminds me of an experience of a couple in Japan who had lost everything in a flood. They said, "We thought that we trusted in Jehovah before, but now we really know what it means." And as one missionary commented, "It's not until your back is against the wall that you see Jehovah's hand." So we keep in mind the words recorded at Isaiah 30 and verse 15. Your strength will be in keeping calm and showing trust. Yes, we remain calm and show our trust in Jehovah. We have absolute confidence that He knows our brothers' needs and will care for them. As our 2022 year text, Psalm 34:10 reminds us, those seeking Jehovah will lack nothing good. Perhaps we could illustrate this with a caregiving situation. When we are caring for a loved one who is suffering, it can be harder than if we were the one suffering. Why is that? Because when we are the one suffering a problem and we rely on Jehovah, we experience the peace that only He can provide. But for the caregiver observing it, it can be much harder. The caregiver's imagination can run wild with all the problems and worries and what-ifs. Do we see the point?
This is a really odd thing to say. It just really struck me. So I'm not the first person to claim to be a great counselor, psychologist, or something like that, and know just all the ins and outs of human emotion and why people think the way they think. That's not my gift, okay? But this really struck me. Why would he say that? Why would he say that in any context, the caregiver, would have a harder time than the person experiencing the actual suffering? Now, maybe that can happen. Okay? But what does that say about the caregiver? Does the caregiver actually think that about himself or herself? That, wow, the stress I feel about taking care of my loved one who has terminal cancer, man, this is harder for me than it is for them because Jehovah's comforting them. He's not comforting me. He's comforting them because maybe they seem like they're positive about everything, right? So it seems like everything's going well for them as well as it could because they have terminal cancer, but Jehovah's taking care of them. But me, my mind is racing. I'm worried. I'm stressed out. So anyone who thinks that is just utterly selfish to even begin to think that you are having a harder time as the caregiver. So if that's the case, if that type of person is just utterly selfish to think a thing like that, why would he even bring this up as some kind of illustration? What are we supposed to take from that? Are we supposed to take from that it's okay to think that we're having a harder time as the caregiver? But if we're not supposed to think like that, if that's the wrong thing to think, we would hope that he would just come out and tell us that, although that can happen with some people, that's not the right way to think. That is selfish. That's a selfish way to think. Does he come out and say that? Well, let's see.
When it comes to our brothers and sisters who are affected by the war in Eastern Europe, we are much like a caregiver. We're concerned about them. But that's different than actually being in the situation. Jehovah gives His Holy Spirit according to the actual need. So we're sure that Jehovah is providing just what our brothers and sisters in Eastern Europe need at this time.
Okay, so he didn't come out and say it. It's almost like he took that illustration and kind of ran with it a little bit and started paralleling the fact that we're here, we're living our comfortable lives in America, all right? Or you may live in another part of the world. I'm just using America as an example. So we're here, we're comfortable, we don't have wars coming our way, but those people over there in Ukraine, those people are experiencing hardships. So he took an illustration or an example about a caregiver and took it over to the situation about us looking at our friends over in Ukraine as if we're the caregiver of those in Ukraine. So are we to take that to say that we're having a harder time than them because we're more worried about it because Jehovah's comforting them and taking care of them? So we're having a hard... It just seemed like that example that he gave was meaningless. meaningless, and really just a bad example if you're not going to turn around and condemn that type of behavior. But he didn't do that. He just kind of moved along and just took that example, and it looks like he's paralleling that to the Ukraine and Russia situation.
When we remember this, it can help us to cope with our anxiety. What's the fourth point that can help us? We must remain neutral. We realize that many news reports may be propaganda that's designed and slandered to motivate listeners to take sides. How do we respond when we hear such reports? We safeguard our hearts and minds, realizing that all human governments will soon be replaced by God's kingdom.
That doesn't really answer it. Because he's saying, like, remain neutral, and you're going to hear propaganda. So remain neutral, and you're probably going to hear propaganda. And then know that all of this is just soon going to come to an end. How does that help you to remain neutral? Okay, because to remain neutral means you're looking at this situation in Ukraine. You're saying, I'm not going to take the side of the Ukrainians, and I'm not going to take the side of the Russians. I'm going to have no opinion on the matter? Surely he doesn't think that. Surely you don't think that. I can almost guarantee you don't think that. Why? Well, you probably don't think it's right for Russia to be invading Ukraine. You probably don't think that's right. Okay? Is that a neutral position? Doesn't sound like it is, right? Because you're saying that Russia is in the wrong for invading Ukraine. But then he goes to talk about the propaganda, that as if we can't trust the news outlets. And maybe that's the case sometimes, that you can't trust some news outlets. But how does that inform this neutrality? Because what he's saying is, I guess he's saying, well, neutrality means we're not going to condemn Russia, and we're not going to condemn Ukraine. We're just going to sit back, help when needed, and just wait for Jehovah to put all this to an end. You see, when he uses language like this, maybe it just sounds good to a Jehovah's Witness because, oh, he's talking about neutrality. We're not going to get involved in it. You're not going to get involved in it, but you have a reason for thinking that it's wrong for Russia to invade Ukraine. Is Ukraine the aggressor in this war? Are they the aggressor in this war, or are they on the defensive in this war? And think about this. Is it wrong to defend yourself? I'm not going to get into just war theory. There's not enough time for that, but just think about that. Interestingly, we are in Luke 21, if you're watching this. And there is a really interesting verse, if you might know where I'm getting at. It's just interesting that we were just there. If I can find it. Luke 21:36. But now whoever has a money belt is to take it along, likewise also a bag. And whoever has no sword should sell his garment and what? Buy one. And buy one. Whoever has no sword should sell his garment and buy one. Notice Jesus says this after the Olivet Discourse, where he talked about all of these events, tribulation, wars, rumors of wars, all these things. After he says all that, at least from the text, I'm sure days passed and all that, but at least if you're reading a text, the next chapter, he says, buy a sword. Interesting. What do you do with swords? If you're not going to do anything with a sword, why do you have it? Right? Why do you have it? So what I'm trying to do is just get you to think about this whole idea of neutrality and war and self-defense. It's something worth thinking about.
We know that no human efforts can bring true peace and security to the earth. Only God's kingdom can and will do so. Therefore, our hearts and minds are devoted to that kingdom. We've discussed 4 things that can help us not to be terrified by the events in Eastern Europe. We remember why Jehovah allows these things. we keep realistic expectations, we show our trust in Jehovah, and we remain neutral. What has helped some of our brothers and sisters to deal successfully with hearing of wars and reports of wars? Let's watch the following video.
While reading the news about the horrific effects of the bombings, I felt cut to the heart. Feelings of powerlessness and helplessness overwhelmed me.
When you feel overwhelmed by all the news reports on the war, you pretty much get pulled into everything that's happening. That definitely affects you and your thinking. And your neutrality can really be put to the test.
My family lives in Ukraine, so from the beginning of the war, I was worried about their safety. To keep up to date with what was happening with them, I tried to call them every day. What I learned from them affected me a lot, and it didn't allow me to think calmly about the situation.
I was moved by the stories of our brothers who had to flee their homes with their children in order to save their lives.
I have found that reading the Bible often works well for me. I read it in the morning, during the day, and before going to bed. It removes negative images and emotions from my mind, and more importantly, it often allows me, so to speak, to hear God's voice and regain my emotional balance.
I tried to reflect on how Jehovah had protected his servants in the past. I also imagined the times described in Psalm 46 verse 9, which says that Jehovah is bringing an end to wars throughout the earth. This verse reinforces my belief that soon Jehovah will destroy all weapons and there will be peace in all the earth.
I try to pray about specific individuals. It helps me to be more effective in giving practical help.
I've made a real effort to follow less news on the war. What has really helped is following the news releases on our website, jw.org, about brothers and sisters from different countries, not just Ukraine and Russia. Their example of neutrality and loyalty has also helped me to keep my focus.
A lot of things convince me that the only solution is God's kingdom. First of all, the stark contrast between Jehovah's people and the people who do not believe in him.
There's no prejudice, no injustice. We're motivated by love for each other, and it's beautiful to see that in every country. We don't get carried away with our own different backgrounds. It's beautiful to see that it's possible, even now.
I'm sure that Jehovah, by means of his kingdom, wants and is able to undo all the harm that results from human rule.
I'm convinced that only God's kingdom can provide a lasting solution to all problems. I fully believe in what Jehovah says, because it's always true.
Soon when God's kingdom rules over the whole earth, then we'll really enjoy peace.
Did you notice how they cope with the trauma of news reports? They focus on God's kingdom as the solution. They limit the amount of news they consume, meditate on how Jehovah has helped his servants in the past, pray frequently, and focus on the time when there will be no more war, but instead lasting peace. No doubt these same things will help us too. Jehovah understands that we need not only physical support, but also emotional support. For example, think about the latest Awake magazine entitled, "A World in Turmoil, How You Can Cope." It highlights how you can protect your health, livelihood, relationships, and your hope. And for each of these topics, it includes helpful tips. That is food at the proper time. In the midst of all this turmoil in Eastern Europe, it has been so encouraging to hear of the generosity of our brothers and sisters in nearby lands. Tens of thousands have offered accommodations to those who are displaced. Many are helping with relief efforts, whether it is assisting those who arrive at border crossings, at relief centers, or providing food and other basic items.
So what I want to know here is that how much of this relief work is happening with non-Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm not saying it's wrong that they're helping their own, that's fine, but how many non-Jehovah's Witnesses are they helping? We're usually not told. But if I were a betting man, I would bet that almost all of the resources are going only to Jehovah's Witnesses and not non-Jehovah's Witnesses.
Because of their proximity to Ukraine, our brothers in Hungary, Moldova, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and other lands have been very busy in coordinating relief efforts in their branch territories. And many are working hard to help our refugee brothers and sisters to get settled and back on their feet. We continue to keep all you dear brothers and sisters in our prayers. As we've discussed, we do not need to be alarmed by wars and reports of wars. Rather, we have full confidence that Jehovah will continue to care for his precious sheep. From the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is JW Broadcasting.
Okay, played the whole video, whole report. Hopefully you all stuck with us through that. If you have any thoughts or comments, I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to leave those down below. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you're on my website, michaeljfelker.com, you can leave comments there. Or if you'd like to contact me directly, if you go down to the show notes, the podcast show notes, or the video description, you can see several different ways for you to contact me there. If you'd like to talk on the phone, through WhatsApp, through Skype, happy to have a conversation with you through that. You can remain anonymous too if you'd like, or if you want to email me, you can contact me that way too. So I don't know what next week's review is going to be. It really depends on if the Watchtower study for that week is interesting. So if it is, we'll definitely be delving into that and just going back to our weekly routine of reviewing the Watchtower study articles. But aside from that, if you'd like to support this ministry, the best way for you to do that is to subscribe and hit the notification bell and the thumbs up icon if you are watching this on YouTube. What that does is that helps the algorithms in getting podcasts like these recognized. So if you're, for example, someone's watching one of the secular channels that criticizes Jehovah's Witnesses on the recommended videos, hopefully ones like this or the other Christian channels would appear there. So that's what happens when you support channels like this, by liking, subscribing, and hitting those notification bells. Also, another way to support this is to share this content with someone who needs to hear it. So it's not only on YouTube, but it's also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So several different outlets where you can view this and share it with others. And lastly, if you'd like to support this work financially, you can go down to the video description or the show notes, and there's a link there to Patreon to become a monthly supporter. Every little bit helps. It basically helps to keep the lights on and to keep up with the technology improvements that are needed. So thank you all so much who support this in every way, financially or not. You all mean so much to me and so much to others who benefit so much from this work. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. Have a great week, and we will hopefully see you next week. For more information about Jehovah's Witnesses and other topics, please visit michaeljfelker.com. There you can also reach me directly to submit questions or comments to be covered on the JW Review. To subscribe to this podcast, please go to iTunes and search for the JW Review.